When the Romans, they were appalled to find head in our history that we've almost forgot. But there are parts of the world where wear their trophies. Buffaloes and men are severed heads, proof of virility, fertility to women. Wedged between us, Naga people live in much the same as did before the coming of the simple. They're farming. Seeing them today, we can get them in our country as steps towards progress. This happened before history, but the progress of the Naga by both Britain, the notoriety of the Naga kept them remote. Communication, decades, the forests and protect them. Or neighbors, the men and the raiders taking land. During the dry season, has built rough bridges of very fragile construction should any village feel itself threatened. As another line of defense, the villages were planted with small bamboo spikes called feet. Poisoned arrows into the victims would fall into a concealed pit of poles. The British started to explore the area in the 1830s until the 80s. There were still blank land, and in the officials had to have military-esque part of the Naga Hill. In remote trophies swung over the house strength and the fertility of them. After Indian independence, in the years followed, the Indian army, and in 19 was made an independent state. Some Nagas carried independence without success, and lies in a politically far from China, Burma. To strengthen this, the Indian government has been, and today, the $500,000 high standard of living. Face to face with the ways of the modern, so Nagaland is. The first one for some years was Professor Hemmendorf, a Londoner. He originally made contact with them. Met on his return, seen the brass trophies on their chests. The party of travellers would have had. They're happy to accept a traveller to pass.
And particularly was a moving experience. 4 years had passed since the spell of the gifts of these attractive people. 12 months I had shared many of the injustices of the Western world. Learned to share their and to relax in the. As I found the news of my ahead of me, waited me. Sadly, some of my died, but others were who had been children when I gave me a warm welcome. Don't hide their surprise. It is like a dream. They told me again in the you must be in the land of
the road to the land of the then underground to Boo. There in this world, while them in a burial hut, those he sacrificed in the skulls of ancestors, while the heads of his enemies part in village life. Remember from which village eat, and there were no rules. These were once the men walking in the forest, water from the well. All forces cling to these with rice beer, village, giving the people when there was a victory, Dunn would boast of being as mighty as the cloud down fireballs. Cheering ahead gave a man his virility. Came the tattooing, whose meant he'd been present while one on his neck and face cut off a head. Of the headhunters. Tattoo, but it's no fun to have an ads like instrument, and the blue dye is baked. The girls put up, but it's a very pain. Used to taunt young men who warrior, so before had to go headhunting. The last reported case of was in March 1907. Still carries spears wherever. Women and children on their fields. The settlements, the Naga fortresses against their enemy, their rice crops, Nile valleys. Traditionally, the women, the young men stand guard. Hunters attacking gets less, the young men work too. Manage to produce their food with cut off from the developed. They know little about modern. In their system of shifting agriculture, burn, and the soil's exhausted, they pass on. The Nagas, it's still a communal getting together for gossip. As the rice is gathered, the same day, no one in the Naga Hills, all day long, we're slowly up the steep hill to the villaging arms. Another remark. Although the Naga's cooking fed and the food is good and marrow. Raibu. Wing, beating the rice off the purpose. At the end of the day, every village, they've all, and although they're exhausted, up is safe from their neighbors. The rice is... The door doesn't need a simpler idea. Cumbersome bolt, the back in the night. And as a further precaution, people are encouraged to sleep outside the granary door. Take a lover, preparing her brass earrings to make herself more attractive. At the same age house, this is a meeting place for all the men. It used to be the most important, though it's no longer the focal point. Still houses the finest carving. These girls live in a permissive society, object to their having lovers. Dance together, but not towards letting them experiment it while they're very young. And none of the crime or civilized parts of the world. Girls rarely become pregnant, common among primitive people. About 5 years of low fertility, they settle down when they're about. Marriages are usually stable. Everyone washes. The girls stay in a group distance from the village for headhunters to pick off. Acted in bamboo, lifting and carrying, graceful and fitted. The song are all remain part of the world. At Nagaland, there was missionary schools in the villages, 3 colleges, 31 or 44 middle schools, and boarding for St. Hills, and their cities. Here, the first Naga obtained, but such is progress, educated men like this, the villages. Those had no common language. In primary schools, the children used Naga Assamese, which is English, and now as are literate. In one generation, the Nagas enormous progress. The girls in school dances as the boys. There, it's the girls who do it. The Nagas love dressing who spend hours tittiving peacocks, especially.
This of Mawang, I knew him well. She was to see me, but he died some 2 years ago. He had been the undisputed chief of the pure, and under his rule, distinguished vitality. Feasts and rituals were the official ceremonials. To cars which I had brought, splendid attire in the village used to worship by the people's congregation. And within one admirable way of life,
the chief's house to consider the important decisions. Bamboo splits in the heat, new fields for next year's. And look a bit skeptical, an important role in remote joke as a procession for session. Recently, the Nagas are Christian ideas. Spirit of the occasion unaltered. Death is nothing to be feared. Who lives on in the next will stay here. Christians introduced the hymn book in the procession, and they bodies in the open. These were placed on platforms. Only when the head wrenched off, the Latin was allowed to moulder away. Now they're hygienically keep the dead man company. Curious mixture of Western religion beliefs. The burial hut is in the grave, and not out on its journey is expressed in their foot. It was never worn in tree dance afterwards. Necklaces are their wealth, and their headdresses represent killed, while the brass men they've killed. Today, nobody can fierceness or carrier. It's just the Indian government encourages us of their culture. The Nagas have learned the days of glory want them to return. Civilizations, they exist in other ways. International football, headhunting, the ambush as a formal dance.
Land was by jeep transport, which had a large number of villages. But travel is often confronted obstacles. Here, trees, felled bars would have been held up indefinitely for the helpfulness who were returned and came to ours. In half an hour, they had, so we were saved of spending a night. In the plains, they became across a group of fishing in a lake. Were men whose forward to Assam. Nagas poison fish have adopted the technique of the lowlands. I was hills north of the area, including frontier agency, the Second World War. Traveling in Assam has to, in though recent years, many bridges, fair common way of vehicles across. 30 years ago, it was much more formidable. At that time, I had crossed shift rafts. Unexplored tribal Tibetan border and bands of porters. One had lived for centuries in total isolation, kind of Shangri-La.
The valley is 5,000 rich and fertile, and there's rice and clusters of fruit. The Kaisen, called Mitan, East India. The apatanu of property. And every scrap of land. The apatanis, and any disputes are cushion.
Quarrels within the outsiders are objection, and the of public debates. Argue their points with many dramatic gestures. Cattle or valuables as bamboo sticks stand out in a line as in the threat of force was I first lived among the upper witness of a raid against. We were wholesome, rather like the Dafla village. There was no loss of life. Houses could be rebuilt. Even that is resolved by negotiation. Similar scenes can be seen, although money is not. Payments made in salt.
The housewife, the pipes I knew could be in a backyard in any, which is remarkable, completely out of touch with the rest of 5 years ago. They had industriousness has turned this where nothing's wasted. But and they don't make a newfangled wheel. The sledges, and then made it planted. But in spite of the apatani isn't enough. They're encouraged to watch over so the priest offers an aid and rice. Apatanis used to... They weren't badly treated for them to become free. Animals are never milked or are allowed to roam the jungle, be sacrificed. Spring Festival, and the concerted effort of the whole the assembly platform. As a rich man can spare, are feist. Planks and dragged into place of the platform, and this is the only manageable. For real, they have no other contact. This man is the Apatson spirits that rule there, him refreshed with mugs of rice on the gods to accept the sacrifice. It has been ritually beheaded, and from its liver and stomach, whether the omens for the crop are... The meat which are given to all those, there's no waste. Want the whole beast. In the ritual way, the Apatanis have the meat, always gets the biggest share. The more meat, higher his standing in the village. Always share. Men of the rich man's family to everyone in the village. A man can't impress or his foreign holidays. His rivals in hospitality, parties he gives. These poles on the Apatani villages decorate them for the spring fest. After the ceremony, the drinking, these it's left to the young men to... The ropes are made of long canes. It's on the rope until it's got up them high into the air, acrobatics. Get bored with watching and play. They've made the football out of a pig. All the idea of energy. They eat, and anyone on an errand, they move purposefully, nor right, carrying all. Very often they break it if they had a train to catch. Have to move fast to keep up. The Apatani, since their contact with 30 years ago, being photographed, such things. But aware of the curiosity. Problems facing the rest of India crowding. And they're outgrowing. There's no more land for farming, packed full of houses. Now commute at the trot to the nearest town. May be rough, but at the end of it is. There's work in the offices of the Subansiri district. There are shops. Like the Nagas, There's even an appetizer force. We found in the town. And the first appetizer.
Padilayang, for I knew as a is now a pop. He owns a truck, and one of his sons, unheard of. Young trucks along the road at foothills were 2 sisters, the heavy baskets is, and the young lucha. What are dufflers from in the hills above the roads and bridges through the valleys of the foot-speed communicationsmen and the outside A, who 25 seen even a wheel, the modern traffic, as like other business, the young upper restaurants, and sit and manner, by their hairstyle, dress in modern fashion. Mingle in the markets of Indian plains peoples as an exchange of ultimately to mental and social interest.
The Independence Day in Haflong, a change in attitude. Patanis come down to their neighbors. It's no longer the clan group to which they belong, but a continent taking the parade itself. The whole occasion still has the Nagas have seen back in the village this rule. British bungalow crumbled, but the old British distance span well looked at. With the British who built churches at the headhunting a poor buried this village's collection of grave. Fine and familiar symbol, stone tallies mark the 64 women in his wife. Of human heads captured and free. They mark the night, as do the skull. Tallies were, so medals were one part of Naga's accepted happily. Took an office job at headquarters as made him fat. In is thin. His med's fights of his youth, bravery and daring, when he kills and daggers. Long ago, the ants, and its remain. The old days, these long-lost excited children will never know them. The Indian government encourages the dances, and their Indians will just be the complicated people, safer and richer than their parents. But there's a gap in their cult, children of headhunters, rituals that made men and lent them grit. What will the Nagas do?